Welcome to the show, Unchaining Your Pain. Honestly, so excited to have on the show today. Suzanne, welcome.
For having me. This is a pleasure.
Those of you that don't know this phenomenal woman, Suzanne holds the title of the to have accomplished the Explorer's Grand, summiting the tallest mountains on each of the 7 continents, North and South Pole. So defining, designing, and the #1 international best-selling How to Make Your Life, Your Team, and Your Leadership a Great. And over the last 3 decades, she's worked with independent leadership roles to summit their own Everest and meet. She's worked with Fortune 100 companies, emerging leaders and teams to meet best practices, patients, and also wow, what a phenomenal you're bringing to the table today in the context of brain health.
Thanks so much.
For those that I know we've described a phenomenal journey, but could you just describe yourself if we're doing an elevator, your key strengths for yourself?
So I think one of the key strengths that I would talk about is, we all are to change, and over our entire life change and adapt. And so I think that something that I haven't created for that, but I think what I do instead is hey, do you have a goal that you would like to reach? Do you have of those individuals who only 8% of individuals goals.
Wow.
So, yeah, 8%. I was coaching somebody, and only 8.
That's not a lot, is it?
That's not a lot. So
do you know how I know this is probably a bit of a how that reflects in the terms of the number summit Everest, because it's not a lot, is it?
No, I did the research the other day. I can't say exactly because I think Everest has more. I did follow that for a while, more summiters than. But I read an article the other day that there have only 350 individuals to reach this.
Wow.
Yeah, I just.
And I know that from your amazing 177th person to achieve the Grand Slam and list, which I think you did back in 2006.
2006.
Yeah,
right.
Wow, amazing.
You have to prove that you were there. You have to. Not only do you have to share your, but you have to have somebody test. Somebody has to write in as well. So.
Wow. Yeah. It's fair enough, really, because I'm sure there's many people who like to think that they can do it from the arms of their chair at home.
Right. Yes, there's a lot of art climbers.
So all about brain health, and I'm just so excited to talk about the context of your journey of adventure. What does optimal brain health mean for you personally?
Excuse me. I think for me it's kind of what I talked about in change. Optimum brain health is having the ability to encounter adversity, obviously with mountain climbing and or with life situations, and be able to adapt, analyze, observe, adapt, and then still flourish, right? And also kind of knowing when enough is enough. There's those individuals that will beat a dead horse, so to speak, right?
Yeah. So
having a healthy body, healthy mind, optimal brain health is really something that emotional intelligence, strategy, compassion, communication, all those kind of things, and putting it all together when it's really necessary. I've seen people in the wilderness freeze and not be able to function, and so that's just not it's not gonna cut it when you're out there, right?
No. Do you know, I loved how you drew on that, because I like to look at the 4 quadrants of our well-being, which is our emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual. And you mentioned all of those. And it's important to remember that physically, like, we can't having it all physically dialed in doesn't mean that we're going to be successful.
Right.
Because you need to be able to leverage your emotions, whatever they may happen to be. And I'd love to talk about that in a bit. It is, whatever they are, is to acknowledge them, accept them, and then express them in a way that's constructive and not destructive to you. And then also tap into that mental ability, mental resilience in terms of the thoughts that we're listening to, having that clarity of thought and be able to focus on what we want to accomplish. And finally, that spiritual resilience, if you will, spiritual well-being, is to know what our goal is and look beyond the goal, because there can, if your goal is to climb Everest, as you know, there's always another day to climb it. But if you put yourself in a situation where you think you're physically robust enough, but actually reality is mentally you don't have it, there may never be another day. And I think that's really important, that we look at all of those aspects from a brain health perspective, to know where we're at, know where we want to go, and then we can dial into the areas that we need to work on. So I'd love to dial into this at the start of your journey, because I love your book Lead from the Top, because I was just reliving some of my adventures when I was reading it, and the experiences you have in translating that into the project world and the corporate world to help people really uncover their strengths and acknowledge their weaknesses. So let's go back to the beginning of your journey, when you first got that adventure bug. Would you mind taking us back to, I know, when you were growing up, it wasn't really in you, was it? That adventurous bug didn't really exist until there was this real tipping point. Could you take us to tell us your story to get to there, that little adventure you went on?
I always tell people I'm kind of that commoner, I'm the one that you meet at the grocery store or talking to the checkout lady at, at the post office or whatever, So I didn't come from a climbing legacy, but, I came from the Midwest and ran around and, played in streams, et cetera, et cetera. But I had an opportunity. I had heard, back to this climate change, and it's been happening many, many years, not just, in the front news today. I heard that the snows on Kilimanjaro were melting, disappearing. And Kilimanjaro had been really this iconic thing in my childhood. I'd watched it on television, the Serengeti and in the background. And it was something I thought I really wanted to do. So I contacted a friend of mine who had was pursuing the 7 summits, and he told me a little bit about it and kind of prepped me, and I went and climbed it. And I had done some hard things in the past. I had done the boundary waters, canoed, et cetera, but nothing was quite like this mountain. And when I got done, I was just sort of sad. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know what was going over me. So I contacted my friend, and he said, "Oh, well, you've got it." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what did I have? Did I have a parasite from, Africa? What do I have? And he goes, "I think you have the climbing bug." And so he kind of recommended that I go off to mountaineering school in Alaska. And so I went, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done to date. But there was something about that, as you know, from the military, there's something about that gives you not only self-worth, but self-confidence and yearning for more, right? Yearning for more. So then I went on to go to Russia, and I met my climbing buddies. He and I ended up doing a lot of climbing after that together. But I was hooked, that fish. It's like, oh, I think I could try this.
Mm.
So I and my new climbing buddy started clicking off the 7 summits. And
Wow.
that's kind of how it happened.
And, it didn't just happen because you don't just show up at the bottom of Kilimanjaro and go, I'm going to climb this mountain.
No.
Or some people do,
Yes,
but they generally
I think
don't
they're
climb
young.
it successfully. So what I love about your book is the journey that you have to go on just to get to the start.
Yes.
And that's so important, that we kind of think that, and certain parts in our life we just can start, but the start is often a lot earlier
Yes.
than perhaps we think it is in the context of walking along that path, or walking along that trekking that you're doing. So could you just describe for the listeners, in terms of the training, how you evolved your workbook, your plan, just to get to the start of the trek to go up Kilimanjaro?
So so in any expedition, it takes a while to get, a lot of times, even just to the base of the mountain before you start your climb. So you have to be prepared for walking hours all day. And people think, oh, I could walk all. No, probably not. If most people who walk 2 hours are exhausted. I'm talking 6 hours. Skiing to the South Pole, 10 hours. These are the kind of things that you have to put your body into, but your mental state as well. It's not, you can be as physical as possible, but how are you going to continue to take those steps? And so the training was a lot of backpack. I put cat sand in it. Started with the kitty litter, and then continued to add up in weight. And I had a little tiny hill close to me, and I walked up and down and up and down. And I was a runner in a previous life, so I realized that from running, the mentality is if you can do 6 miles, you can do 12 miles. So if you're in shape to do, you can double your mileage.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing is I made sure that I could walk with my weight for Kilimanjaro about 4 hours. And then I knew I could, take on the challenge.
Great.
And so, and it went up from there. I mean, Kilimanjaro, it's a tough mountain. I'm not going to say, oh, it's merely a hike. A lot of people will say that, but it's a different kind of a hike. It's a mountain hike. So, but
it's altitude. You've got the altitude sickness potentially to contend with, and all the differences within the group as well.
Yeah, and so, but to get to the top of Everest and down again, because that's important. It's a 2-month journey. So the training and the physical and mental tie-in has to be real. I mean, you have to have real intent. So
yeah. And what do you think? What was the real spark for you to do it? Were you doing it to prove something to yourself? Were you doing it to have an accomplishment that you could hang your hat? What was that real driver taking on one mountain is, a challenge in itself, if we just take Everest, but you took on 7 and the North and the South Pole. Was it just like, I need to do more, and this gives me more? What was it for you?
So I climbed them in what is sort of a sequential order. So not necessarily the lowest to the highest, though you could sort of say that. But excuse me, it was more or less the easier to the hardest. Okay. Some people start Makes with sense. Everest. And I made an agreement with myself that I could stop at any time if this was a crazy adventure or venture, or if it was too hard. But I I found that it was, I can't, it was just this desire to do the next.
Yeah.
And the third mountain, let's see, the fourth mountain I attempted, Aconcagua, I didn't make it. And I consulted my climbing buddy, and she goes, oh yeah, there's always one you don't make. You just got to go back and do it again. So her attitude for me, she didn't make Denali, but that was next on our list. We were heading off together with Denali. So she just said, brush off the scraped knee and keep going.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and it was great to have a companion like her. We're still very good friends, and we would just wake up in the morning laughing and giggling in our tent, and everybody would wonder what kind of, what juice are you guys drinking? So the attitude, having this positive companion motivated you, even like the ridiculousness of we're in this tent and there's frost and we've got, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And we just would laugh and laugh and laugh that we were in this situation. But it just kept us going, so recognizing being in that moment and just, embracing it and finding humor in it.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's so important. I think for some of my ventures, I maybe didn't have as much humor as I perhaps should have done. But one of the things that I would do when I would go climbing, particularly when I would go by myself, is carry a little teddy with me, because it always because I'm chuckling now, it would almost make me chuckle because it's so immature to carry a little teddy, but at the same time it's very funny because you can bring that child sense of humor to the situation, and when it, you get into adversity, you could say, well, at least I've got my teddy with me, or what. And I know lots of other climbing buddies that take a bit, not just little teddies, but take full-size teddies from when they're little with them as their motivator to keep going, and to have that little bit of humor as well. So important.
I had a little puppet mouse.
Oh, did you?
Milk on Everest, and every night I wanted to make sure that he didn't get frosty, so I put him in a little. I know. So I put him in a little gear bag, and I had by this time I had a lot of significant things that I would wear on my neck, right? And so I would cover it up and put it on him, and I would close him up, and okay, good night, Milk. And my next door neighbor tent mate, not, we slept in our own tents on Everest at the base camp, and he would go, who are you talking to? Every night you say goodnight to this thing. And I'm like, yeah. But yeah, he climbed Everest with me.
But I think that's brilliant, because it allows you to get out of your own skin. And even when you're alone, you've got somebody to talk to who can listen to you and not judge you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I would like to write a children's book using this, this little guy.
That sounds brilliant. But it's so important. And what I loved about your journey to Everest is there were other little nuances that you would bring with you to lift your spirits. And from a brain health perspective, I like to think about the 5 pillars of our feelings, our actions, our connections, our thoughts, and our surroundings. Mm-hmm. And our surroundings is something that we don't pay enough credence to, mm-hmm. in terms of our health and well-being, and how it can motivate us and lift our spirits and lift our journey. And as we started the conversation, it can also pull us down if there are natural disasters which we experience in our life, which are continuing to get worse as the climate warms. But nevertheless, there is always a lovely piece of nature or connection to our senses that can really ground us and bring us into the present and bring us back to past memories that really serve us in a positive way. Mm-hmm. Would you just describe what you brought to your tent at the base camp?
Well, and
why it was important.
Yeah, so I'm writing 2 other books, and this will come out because I think we bring this to the table in our daily lives and in our work and even in our play. I would sort of go through this ritual thinking somewhat like the samurai warrior. So you've done your training, you've done your mental penance and dedication. And then also I would have, like I said, I had a couple of trinkets that I carried with me on all the mountains and things that I was going to give to my kids. I had children at the time. They were in junior high school age. And I thought, when I'm done with all this, this is something I want to share with them. But they became more of a talisman, right? So they were super important to me. And the monks would bless us and put on a red, just this braided rope kind of thing. And these things became very spiritually significant, almost giving power in some aspects. So every climb, I would bring this power with me. It's hard to describe, but it was personal, spiritual, blessed. And so all of this was something that I think that people in my coaching, I ask what their talisman is. What is it that you have that you put on? It could be a suit, if that's how you show up and this empowers you. It could be that tie.
Well, I've got a necklace on. So this necklace is from my family. My mum and dad got it for me, and it's important.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's important.
Yeah. So these things help us, and you can feel them. They get hot, they get cold. This is why I told you I put it over milk at nighttime, because it would get cold. Let him keep that safe. So, and I think it's important to bring that to the table. Bring that, I'm ready. I've done my job. I've got my education. I've got my learnings. I've stumbled. I've fallen. I have my experience. And I feel that we need to bring that to our daily lives.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that when you're in your tent, you put some herbs out, and the heat of the sun. The heat of the sun would warm the herbs and bring this lovely smell, this aromatherapy tent.
So, I would, every ounce you carry, it equals a kilo, and a kilo can be a killer. That's,
absolutely.
And so I would bring a couple things that were important to me. Like camping can be a smelly thing. And even though I cleaned every day, or, we get, some people didn't, but I did. But yes, I had a little sachet that I would, they don't weigh them a lot, but it just adds to the weight. And I would put it up in the top of the tents, have a little kind of netting, and the sun would shine on it and warm it. And you could smell roses. Or I had lavender in my sleeping bag, because that was very soothing to sleep at nighttime.
That's a great thing to use for sleep from a brain perspective.
And then I had a little bit, just a little glass bit of perfume that I would pack. And I would just put a little bit for me. Nobody smells you, but you smell yourself.
You smell you,
And exactly. And so, like I said, Everest, even though I did shower on Everest, it's a 2-month adventure.
Yeah, it's a long time.
And you're not necessarily washing your clothes.
No.
So I did take some things that were very aromatherapy. And, I got a little criticized from some of the individuals. Oh, you're bringing perfume. It's like, it's not for you. Trust me. but for that calming of the brain. Sometimes you're sweating hard. You're going up the Khumbu Icefall, and you can kind of smell something that's soothing for you.
Oh, that's brilliant. And do you know what I really loved as well that you brought with you was your thermometer that you would measure. So
the
temperature around you.
Yes, exactly. So I still, it has a little wind gauge, like that's useless, but it had a thermometer on it. And instead of having it, I would always wear it around me. And so I no matter where I was, it seemed to always be 13 degrees, right? And I know that the temperature oftentimes was much colder than that. But it was very comforting to me, like this force field, like I can emit at least 13 degrees out here. I'm encased, I'm in bubble.
I'm invincible.
I know. I'm on the top of Everest. Oh, 13 degrees, I'm fine.
But that is, it's such a small thing in our lives. We focus on the big things that are the big needle movers, but actually often it's the littlest things in our mind that can make the biggest difference. Just having the smell back to soothe your mind, and we know from science that lavender is very soothing, and having those smells back that you can relate to is incredibly soothing. And I love that you put lavender in your sleeping bag. I'm definitely going to take that one forward. And also having that awareness of your surroundings, your personal, like your physical aurora, that it was in control. That sense of control that you had with your body, which really controlled your mind. And it's so important. And I don't think we necessarily pay enough credence to these little things that make the big differences for us.
Right. We talk about aura and we talk about it, but in my mind, I could really visualize it with my little 13 degrees, that I have extension. I have this outer giving power, right? And so you're right. That really did calm my mind. It was on the South Pole. It was on the North. Some of the coldest places in the world. And yet I seem to have some control over my own little biosphere.
Yeah.
And mentally, that is, and we all do, we all do. I could physically see it. And oftentimes we can't physically see it on a day-to-day, but that gives, just that image gives comfort to the brain that I'm in control here.
Yeah. Isn't it funny though that we need external validation? You needed that external temperature measure to validate what actually you already knew subconsciously, that you were okay. But you had to tell yourself you were okay to be okay. And I just find that fascinating as well, in the context of how it's so easy for our mind to play tricks on us. And I'd love to talk about your journey up Everest and to break it down in the importance of us building that mindset that we need to overcome adversity and to really unchain the pain that we may experience on our journeys. Could you just tell us a little bit about your journey? Because I know there were some very difficult pieces of your journey where you could have easily thrown the towel in, and actually there were little things that happened that stopped that from occurring.
So it's a long journey, and you kind of climb Everest 4 times. That's confusing for people, but because of the altitude, you have to go up and then you have to go down. You can't just walk straight up 5 miles into the air, into the atmosphere, because of the things that would happen in your brain or your lungs, right? So you go up, you acclimatize, you get used to that lesser oxygen level, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'd gone through a lot of things on the way. As I said, it's a long journey. But that determination, I'm here, we're heading finally for the top, and we get up to the death zone. That's what it's called. I didn't name it. It's about 26,000 feet, which is, the body just starts to die if you're there too long. But you have limited supply of oxygen, and you have so many days, nights that you can be up there before you really just have to turn down, because you're carrying these cylinders of oxygen, and it has a minimal amount. You don't have an endless supply. And the first night we headed out, we had climbed up to our camps, gotten into our tents, tried to go to sleep because we were going to push out that same night. The weather was supposed to be good. But when about, I don't know, in the afternoon at some point, I have it documented. It's the wind started blowing, and you're like, well, no star. And this was a 10-year anniversary of the book that Into Thin Air.
Where John Krakauer's amazing book.
Yeah. So, of course, it's fresh in our mind. They had a ceremony early, so everything, so you're a little bit worried that, gosh, a storm is coming in. But indeed, 26,000 is in a call, right? So it's the saddle between the two mountains, Everest on one side and Lhotse on the other. So the wind can come in through here, and sometimes it just sort of circles around along the two faces, going back and forth. It's called a spindrift, or it's spindrift, like a dust devil or a water spout. And so this is actually what was happening. But when we got out of our tents, and you're all bundled up, you have your summit suit. It's like 2 sleeping bags and oxygen and face mask and everything, you're just completely covered. The moment I stepped out, the inside of my goggles frosted all up. And it was because my face was too warm for, I didn't look at my 13 degrees. My face was too warm for what was happening outside. And so I ended up going through 3 pair of goggles, and everyone did the same thing. So the Sirdar, the head of the Sherpas, the people who live indigenously and then help in the mountaineering, he told me to go without them, which in, spindrift and at 26,000 was probably not a great idea, but no choice, right? So we walked along in this condition for about an hour, and of course your feet are being buried in snow. So when you walk on top of the snow, these are still boots that have plastic inside, and they have fabric on the outside. So they're, your socks and your body heat is what's really heating those boots in the end. And so walking in through snow just keeps chilling the boot over and over and over again. So my feet started getting what I thought might be frostbite. My face is getting just pummeled. Just
horrendous. I can't imagine. I've been in whiteouts. It's horrific. So
yeah. So I our Sirdar Lakpa came up the side and was checking in on everybody, and I said, I got to turn. I'm not Everest quality if this is how I have to do it. I'm not going to risk my face. I'm not going to risk my feet. And we're just started, an hour out. So he pulls me offline, and he double checks. We'd been on a couple mountains together already, and he knew me and really wanted to check in. And I said, no, I'm just, this is not for me. And so he, at the policy with this climbing company, and most of the climbing companies is another Sherpa is assigned to you. And if you have to turn at any time, they go back. So we turned around and we went back, and thank goodness, he opens up my door, unzips my tent door, and I get in, and I have snow everywhere. It's like a fire hose that sprayed this fine dust in every fold and crevice. And so you can't get into a sleeping bag with this kind of stuff. We have down bags, and so they can get wet. The wet bag, down bag
doesn't work.
So, and the reason you take down is because it's lighter than synthetic, right? So anyway, so I stood up and brushed as much as I could in the corner, took my jacket off, and but I was exhausted. I was just exhausted mentally,
And your oxygen mask on at the time as well. So it's not
Yeah,
just like normal breathing. You were,
yeah, yeah,
deficient of oxygen, only
yeah.
30%, isn't it, at that level? So
So I laid down and I got in my sleeping bag and I did something I'd never done before. I got in the sleeping bag with my down pants on. That's how just I wasn't necessarily cold. I just could not remove one more piece of anything.
yeah.
And I laid down and I must have fallen asleep immediately, just dead to the world. And a little while later, I don't know what time it was, but I hear the tent door opening. My partner came in and I pushed myself up and I said, "Congratulations for summiting Everest." And he said, in sort of the same flat mindset I had, "Oh, I turned an hour after you did. We're all back." And so I laid back down and I'm going, genius. I'm so smart. Why were they out there another hour? There's still some humor in my mind.
But I mean, you had the obviously the much earlier warning signs that you needed to send because you didn't have goggles on.
Yeah. So he came in and I realized, oh my gosh, I should ask if I can help him because it was such a struggle. And luckily, thank goodness he said no. But the next day, that spindrift kept going and going and going, and really demons came. So at that level, there are many bodies that are kind of scattered around who have died.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, those ghosts came to visit me.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, I'm not going to be one of those. Where if this doesn't stop, we're never going to get another chance. We're going to have to go down. And it was a dismal, dismal day.
And you'd already spent, a month and a half climatizing to get just to there, just to make it clear to everyone this wasn't, you just gone up Everest, and this was Camp 4 and it was 4 days. This was a whole heap of acclimatization with a cough that you'd had, that you were getting over and everything as well, that you just literally got over having gone all the way back down. And then back up again. So it was a real journey just to get to where you were.
Yeah. It wasn't, I had a friend, one of my climbing friends from Denali, and he said, you didn't get a taxi ride up there. Nobody Ubered me.
No. Or helicoptered you.
This was a journey.
Yeah.
And so at this point, all of that is kind of crushing down on you. And, I really have to thank my tent mate at the time because he kept a light on for me. No, it's okay.
Wow.
And sometimes you need that. I just couldn't get out of the funk because I'd already turned once. I'd already kind of said in my mind, I'm not going to, So, this is the most amazing thing. I don't necessarily believe in miracles, but I love this story. So,
I love this one. I can't wait for you to tell it.
Yeah. So about 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon, I heard some noise. I mean, we had to be dug out. The snow covered our tent. Our shell had to be dug, everything. It was just dismal. And about 3:30, we heard the neighbor tent, our team, some rustling around noise, talking, blah, blah, blah. And I would learn later that the guide shushed two of my teammates out into the bad weather. When we were at a monastery coming up, the Rinpoche, the Buddhist monk there, blessed us all and wrote a blessing on a card. And you have to ask permission to climb Everest from the goddess who lives on top. And we all had one in our backpack. We brought them all. It was important that we took them on our journey. I always had it in my backpack the whole time, right? But so the guide shushed two of my climbing buddies out. And one of them goes out, lifts up the card. The wind's shaking, like the prayer off of the card, And he goes back in and my other friend goes out and he does the same thing. And, just howling wind out there, and he goes back in. And asking the goddess to grant us permission.
Yeah.
And in half an hour, the wind subsided.
Wow.
And I have, I have no idea if it was the card, but I'm not going to say it wasn't,
No.
Because you do ask permission of higher power in many parts of your lives.
Yeah.
And we were granted the blessing to try again.
Wow.
Now, whether we would make it or not, but safe passage was blessed upon us.
Yeah.
And
the
it was
stuff that you couldn't control.
No.
Yeah.
The mountain's going to do what the mountain's going to do, but we might have forgotten to take the right steps.
Mm-hmm.
And upon taking the right steps, the wind subsided.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was an amazing, yeah.
And then you went onwards that evening. You left at 8, didn't you?
Yeah, that night we got ready. We got going. We were on hot standby, they call it,
Yeah.
And so out the door we went. Everything's fine. Off we went up to
goggles working. Everything was
goggle,
all fine.
oxygen's flowing, toes, fingers, everything's okay. But it was a tough night. You climb over the night so that you can get there hopefully for sunrise. But the most important thing is to come down in the light.
Yeah.
So that's when you're the most tired. That's when the most accidents can happen. That's when, things you want to have, people want visual, right?
Mm-hmm.
It used to not be that way, but it's been changed, especially after
2014, wasn't it?
No, it's 96.
Oh, 96, yeah.
96 after that. So anyway, it's very, very steep. There's this huge pyramid, and I mean, talk about, traverse, how mountain climbing is. It's not a straight line.
No.
It's back and forth, and it's much like skiing downhill. Sure, you can go straight down, but better to go back and forth, right? So same thing, you traverse, and hours into it, my feet were getting cold because first of all, that you don't generate, your metabolism isn't roaring, right?
Yeah.
You're going slowly. You don't have a lot of oxygen. I have this thing called Raynaud's, which shuts down my fingers and toes. The circulation stays more in my organs and my brain. It's kind of a shunt. And so my feet are getting super cold. And one of the guides comes up to me, asks, checks in. And I said, gosh, my foot is freezing. So we get up to this, they call it the bench. It's just kind of a flat area to sit. And he kind of points me over to one of the Sherpas who's sitting down. And he says, take your boot off. I'm like, take my boot off. So which foot is it? Yeah. So we've all been taught in mountaineering, first aid, how to help somebody who has hypothermia or has, frostbite toes. So I took off my boot and, my foot is steaming. You can just see the steam come off the socks. And the Sherpa takes his hands and slaps my foot, starts rubbing it. It hurt so bad. It was like, that I screamed out loud. But he starts until I could kind of feel it. Then he takes my foot under his parka, under his armpit inside, and puts it there until my toes are actually moving.
Wow.
And helps me put my boot back on. Then my friend comes up to me. This is just another mental piece of the whole puzzle. He comes up to me, the guide, and says, would you like a Viagra? And, now I'm probably at 27,000. And I'm like, what? But a Viagra is a vasodilator, so it could possibly help my fingers and toes.
Yeah.
I'm told by many, many physicians, well, there's better stuff than that. And I'm like, well, you're not at 27,000 feet on Everest. There's not a Walgreens. So, at first I'm like, no, I don't need that. And then I'm like, I have come this far on this journey and I'm not doing everything possible to make it to the top. So I say, hold on. Yes, I'll take that. You know, open my water bottle, pop it in my mouth, take a big swig of water, you know. Plus, I knew that the sun was about to come. I'd been walking into this just amazing black abyss of the sky, you know.
Yeah.
And so I knew the sun was going to come. And no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing, once the sun hits me, I start to warm up.
Yeah.
So I know indeed that if I can just hold out until the sun kind of comes over, I'll be okay.
Wow.
So we turn, and the trajectory is a little different. And we start marching up towards what they call the South Summit. There's just a peak. It's kind of a false peak, if you will. It's not the real summit. It's kind of, you know, on the south side. You got to get over before you head up towards the end. And as I'm walking, you know, my head's down and you're focusing one step at a time. And every time I look up, it's just the right pitch. And I look like I'm walking into the universe.
Wow.
I've never been so close. I kind of got a taste of maybe what astronauts experience.
Yeah.
I've never been into outer space, but it was the closest I'll ever come. It was just amazing. And as I continue to walk along, I look over to my right, and you could see it. The sun's starting to just come over the horizon. And I'm so excited because I know, you know. And then I look again, and I can actually see, again, much like an astronaut, the curvature of the earth.
Wow.
Just with the sun, kind of that yellowish, pinkish sort of color coming up. It was just, I can't describe it. It's just so incredible. It's the shots that you get from outer space. Same thing. And then it happened, you know, the sun comes up. And yes, indeed, I get warm. My toes and fingers are fine. It was just amazing.
Wow.
So we get up to the South Summit, and I look kind of past the South Summit, and the sun is hitting the peak of Everest, but Everest is casting a shadow over the land, and it's a perfect pyramid. And I'm like, oh, everybody, good luck! And I'm like, that is where the Tibetan gold is buried. I'm sure of it. You know, take a picture. So we all took a picture, and then onward to the top, you know, over this thing, down into this little, just landing kind of, per se. And up ahead lie the Hillary Step and the summit of Everest and this ridge that you have to pass. So we stop for a moment to take a break, regroup, and I'm kind of moving over to the right as my fellow teammates are coming down on the left. And all of a sudden, Lakpa, the Surda, grabs my arm. He goes, no, that's a cornice over there. And I'm like, okay. Well, a cornice, for those who don't know, I didn't know until I started climbing mountains, is where the wind pushes the snow on the ridge, but it'll catch and freeze, and it'll go over the ridge.
Over.
So there's nothing underneath. So you don't know how far out there's land and then not land.
Nothing.
Yeah. So he pulls me back, and I come back over, and there's sort of a little, indent, kind of, not quite a cave, but sort of like a little impression. And I see that there's a dead body over there. And so, I move back to center and just kind of hang until we have to move.
Wow.
Yeah. So the reality of, where I am, the past, possible outcomes, a somber moment. And then I pick up, we have anchor lines that we click into. So if we fall, we don't fall to our death off the side of a mountain. And I pick up this line that's not connected to anything on our side. I can see it's anchored on the other side, but and we have to go across this crevasse, and it's not very big. And I talked to my guide. I'm like, this isn't anchored in. I don't know if I can go on from here. And he turns to me. I can laugh now, bless his soul. But we can, I had been on 6 of 7 of these mountains with this man. And you'd think he would give me a pep talk, like now is the time to, put your No, instead he turns to me and he looks at the mountaintop and turns to me again. He says, many have not gone on from here. Like, that is no motivation. So I got so mad. So maybe it did work.
It was motivation. Yeah.
I walked across and I clicked into the anchored line and I started climbing.
Yeah.
And
I think that's so powerful because you leveraged your anger, at the moment where you could have just given up.
Yeah.
It is, and many do, is you use that anger to best effect, and that really powerful emotion often drives us forward in life, and we can see it as a negative, but actually it can be incredibly powerful and positive, and it got you over the Hillary step, didn't it?
Yeah. So
which is no mean feat at all. It's just an amazing, climbing over those 2 big boulders just before the summit. People can throw huge obstacles at you, and it's about having the wherewithal to overcome them.
Yep.
And you made it.
I did. Yeah, it was the most awesome view I've ever had, and we were very fortunate. The weather was just, I do public speaking or professional speaking, and I always say when I get to the top, telling the story, I could see my house. I'm like, okay, well, maybe not my house.
But I think this is a great analogy to our journey in life, is that we, obviously it was an incredibly difficult, an inordinate amount of pain mentally that you had to unchain, from a mindset perspective, to keep going. As you said, it was in the dark. Someone came with the light to help you. And sometimes we think we have to go through the darkness ourselves. But actually, it's getting those people on your journey to help you on your journey that makes that journey so much more enjoyable, like the laughter in the tent and the light in the tent and the little Teddy getting the little guy getting tucked into his own personal sleeping bag, and the people in your team who spoke to the gods of the mountain to help create a safe passage. And having that teamwork and knowing that to get somewhere in life, it's not just about trying to forge it alone. It's about knowing how you can leverage the strengths of everybody on your journey to help you get to the top. With the Sherpa that help warm your feet, the Viagra. There's so many things that go beyond ourselves, isn't it, that helps us. I just think it's an amazing analogy for life's adventure.
Yes, I agree. We are, you're born alone, so to speak, and you die alone, so to speak. That journey is your own. However, along the way, it's never alone. And that's, you are with people throughout your entire life. And I think that relying and interacting and socializing, and that's not Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Socializing with people is important for success.
Yeah. And what would you say was the hardest out of that whole journey? And I know that we have stuff we haven't even talked about, with the Lhotse, the Khumbu Glacier and the icefall experience. But what would you say the hardest part of that journey was for you? That the most painful piece?
Well, honestly, I think that the hardest part was I was going. My relationship with my husband was falling apart. Oh, it's good.
Well,
but
hard.
Yeah. So I don't, it's not why I climbed, but as I climbed these mountains, I became a stronger and more independent person.
Uh-huh.
And the relationship that I was in was very oppressive.
Uh-huh.
And so oftentimes, I remember I was on Choyoyu, which was in Tibet. It's a 8,000 meter peak. I had to see if I could even, if I was worthy of the Himalayas,
Yeah.
could I even, so it's the sixth tallest peak. So I did that before I went and blew a lot of money on a mountain that I might never make to the top, right? And I can remember there going, oh, if I could just make my relationship work. Oh, if I could just go back and be this. If I could just go back and be that. But by the time I hit Everest, it was like, I'm out of this. And so the mental anguish about my relationship over this 2 years and 83 days was probably the hardest. When I was going through my divorce, my attorney said to me, climbing out of your divorce or out of your marriage, I think is harder than climbing Everest. And I think that that's true.
Wow.
I didn't take my marriage vows lightly, and I worked very hard to make it work. But as I found myself, my strength, throughout those years, I realized that I was capable.
Yeah.
But a lot of those nights lying in a bed, a tent, a sleeping bag, were devoted to wrestling with this issue. And I think, so from a mental perspective, you want clarity, and that's why I think my tent mate helped me through so many of these mountains, because we would just laugh. That oppression wasn't on me. But for Everest, she didn't climb Everest. So it was truly a lot of mind games.
So really, you had 2 Everests you were climbing at the time. You were climbing one externally, with the environment and nature, and also you were climbing one internally at the same time as well.
Yeah, I think so. The divorce didn't happen till a while later, but it set the course for me.
Yeah. And what one piece of advice would you give to somebody who has an Everest that they are climbing in their life that is really difficult? It's a really difficult journey that they're going through, and they may be not sure if they're going to get there.
Don't give up. So it takes one step at a time. And as I explained, you have a right to turn at any time, but there could be another direction. There could be something else that you realize then is more important than the current one you're climbing. So, Everest is going to do what Everest is going to do. I had one shot at it, but I didn't consider myself a failure at being at 26,000 feet. Right. So I had a friend who I was on the South Pole. No, he wasn't on the South Pole. We did the mountain on Antarctica together. He's South African. And the first time he climbed Everest, he made it to that place right after the South Summit that I said some people turn. And he said he turned. And he's a psychologist, I think. And in his mind, he said, I failed. I go, you didn't fail. You climbed the mountain. Just because you didn't
didn't get that last bit. Don't ignore all of the steps you took before that. You didn't make that one last step.
Yeah. And so he went back and he climbed it again, and he did make the top. But then he came back and he wrote a very lengthy email about, you were really right. I didn't have to go back, but I had to learn that when I went back.
have to learn the lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have climbing the mountain is the journey.
Yeah.
Standing on the tippy top, sure, it was cool, but the journey is, you know, the path along the way and where it's leading you, and the whole event, the whole expedition, life's whole expedition.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so important that we acknowledge the journey, because we can get so focused on the goal and not embrace the journey. And I love that you had that mental clarity at the top to embrace the views, and all the way up throughout your book. You talk about it is just really absorbing everything about the experience, the beauty of nature, the connection you had with your colleagues, your friends, the teamwork, the knowledge of people and the strengths that they bring, is really absorbing all of that as part of your experience, and absorbing your strength, your superpower, and you know, and celebrating what you bring to the table, even though you maybe didn't realize it sometimes, but bringing that superpower to the table was really, that was really beautiful. And I don't think we acknowledge the journey we're on, and that we are enough.
That we are enough. That is important journey. We are enough. I think
and thank you so much for sharing your true Everest that you were going on at the time.
I don't talk about that much.
Because everybody is struggling with something.
Yes.
And it might not be what you perceive it to be. And you'll only find out if you ask the right questions, what their true Everest is. Suzanne, my goodness, I think we could talk for hours. It's been an absolute, just such a blessing and a real pleasure to have you on the show today on Unchaining Your Pain. Thank you so much for your insight into your journey climbing Everest, both, you know, externally and internally. How can people best get hold of you?
You can reach me at my website. It's www.leadfromthetop.com. Suzanne at leadfromthetop.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach me out there. You know, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to, you know, chat, find out what you're looking for, you know, just say hi.
And do make sure you buy the Lead from the Top book, because it's just an amazing story and something that we can translate to our life experiences. I loved reading it, and really encourage everybody to get hold of that copy and learn from Suzanne's experience climbing Everest and all of the other mountains that you did as well. Thank you again. If there's anything I can do to support you on your journey, please do let me know, and I'll love to reconnect.
The pleasure has been all mine. Namaste.
Namaste. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to like and share this episode and leave a review on my website or on Apple Podcasts. If you're looking for opportunities to optimize your brain health or unchain your pain from a past trauma, make sure you visit my website, www.ruthmaryallen.com, and use the code podcast10 at checkout to get 10% off all programs. And always remember, you are not stuck with the brain you have. You have the power to make it better. You have the power to unchain your pain and optimize your brain power and performance so that you can win back energy and time doing what you love. Each episode of Brain Health Unchaining Your Pain with Dr. Ruth Allan is for educational and demonstration purposes only. The information shared in each episode should not be interpreted as medical advice. This episode should not be used to self-diagnose or self-treat any health, medical, or physical condition. Do not use this episode to avoid going to your healthcare professional or to replace the advice they give you. Consult with a trusted healthcare professional before doing anything contained in this episode. If you have any questions or concerns, please contact www.ruthmaryallen.com/connect.